Here is episode number 95. This podcast is being recorded on the lands of the Turrbal people. I acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. They were the first music makers on this land. In this episode of the Crescendo Music Education Podcast, I talk again to Mark O'Leary. We're going to look a little bit closer at his Young Voices of Melbourne published music and about how singing in a choir can make such positive changes in our lives and the lives of the children or the choristers that are under our care. He gives us some advice as choral conductors, some nuggets of fabulous, and we talk about advocacy. We go slightly off the track and they're wonderful ambles off the track. I think you're going to love this second episode with Mark O'Leary. And if you missed the last one, go back because that gives you that background. It will tell you, so go back to episode 94 and it will give you his bio and a bit of background to who Mark O'Leary is. So welcome to episode 95, my second chat with Mark O'Leary. Welcome to the Crescendo Music Education Podcast, and I have Mark O'Leary with me again for this episode. Welcome back, Mark.
Thanks, Deb. Great to be here.
I want to start off talking about your music because last episode, towards the end, I just mentioned the music that Young Voices of Melbourne published. And I recall meeting them early in my teaching career. And I recall using some of them that became, if I just share a little personal story, that became like some staples for me. So I would like go to a new school and have a new group of kids to form into a choir. And what will I do? And you don't always want to reinvent the wheel and go, okay, I have a new choir, a new situation. I'm going to just go and find myself a whole bank of new works to do. You want to have a couple up your sleeve that you know well, that you know work while you're building the relationships, And the two that come to mind is The Little Fish. I could sing it to you now. And the Lachlan
Could have a
Tigers.
duet.
We could have a duet, except it never works well when in the recording. But so the Lachlan Tigers and the Little Fish just were my staples. I mean, I'm sure you could probably tell by sales that wouldn't they'd have to be two of your most popular. And then moving on, Shackleton, I think I got from you. Would that be right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like gold. I don't care what else Young Voices of Melbourne published. Your existence is worthy just for those pieces.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I look, to be honest, I'm not a fabulous arranger, and many people do it way better than I do. But I've also found that, a few arrangements like you, I think, yeah, I know that this is always going to work, and I keep coming back to them. I think one of the reasons I first started doing it, once I started looking at stuff, is that there's not that much repertoire available for the really young choirs. There's a bucket loads of SSA and more difficult SA music, but very little really simple SA music for choirs who are just starting to learn to sing in parts. And simple unison things where you can focus on making a good sound and just, learning what it is to sing together. So that's always been sort of for me a pretty key part of that series, just finding things that I find work for me that I can share then with other people, and then, like you, become pieces that get repeated over and over in what we've done. It's favorites and comfortable things, but also things that are there for a purpose, so that they're teaching the things that you might want to learn and kids need to learn.
Yes.
So,
and certainly, I mean, I would say you're a really fabulous arranger. But I think what makes the arrangements of yours that I've sung wonderful is that you obviously work with children. It makes a difference when you, I mean, it's the same as my little compositions that are quite humble and not fabulous, but they work because I work with children and I know children's voices and I know what will work with them. And I
yeah.
think that you working with children all the time
Mm,
must enhance your arranging.
yeah. I guess I also have a philosophy with my choirs that I would much rather them within a time frame learn 10 easy pieces than two difficult ones. Um, because I think it's partially by learning new music, you learn how to learn music. It's a little bit like the old AMEB trap, where if you learn your four pieces for your list, A, B, C, and D, and nothing else,
Mm.
you're never going to learn how to sight read, and you're not going to be that much of a musician because you're never really learning how to learn music. But nothing against the AMEB. It was a wonderful organization and fulfilled a very valuable role. But you need to be learning a lot more music than just what you're examined on. And I think it's the same in choirs. I see sometimes that at Stedfords, people have spent a long time working on a difficult two-part arrangement for a primary choir that actually doesn't sound that good in the end anyway, because it's just a bit too hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think, actually, I would rather hear you learn something simple and
Yeah.
something else simple and something else simple. So you've got a few more things under your belt, but it also sounds nicer. And I've
I
never done a concert where someone has come up and said, "Oh, that music was beautiful, but it was way too easy. Why did you do that?"
yes.
I think actually I learned that too from the Tapiola Choir. I don't know if you remember the wonderful
Yes.
Tapiola
Yes.
Choir from Finland.
Mm.
They had a CD called Song. Well, actually, it was an LP when I bought it. Songs Building Bridges, and this is a very virtuosic choir which would commission very, very difficult music from Finnish composers, really hard avant-garde stuff. But on the CD, there would always be two or three people, which were just simple, beautiful things, either composed or folk song arrangements. And you would hear amazing sound, impeccable intonation, and just a really beautiful performance. But that was, I think, really important for them in establishing how to sing beautifully all the time, because you can't really do that if you're doing really, really challenging stuff
Mm-hmm.
all the time as well. Mm.
Yeah. Um, Amen. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. I 100% understand and agree with that one. Wow.
I think actually adult choirs can be some of the worst offenders too.
Yes.
When
Yes.
I've been to performances of choirs, which I will not name, of
No, no, don't name.
work, which are too difficult. And everyone that's up there having a lovely time massacring I don't know, for a Requiem or a Handel's Messiah or something. And you
Oh.
think, I'm glad you're having fun, but it's too hard. For me, it's not music that should be shared in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tricky. People like singing it,
Mm.
but that can be hard.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I agree. That's wonderful. So we'll make sure in the show notes for this episode as well that I'll put in a link to your music and people can get in and have a look at what you've got in there. And that some good Australian folk stuff, which is good. And if there's some
Hmm.
international listeners, they might go, oh, let's add some Australian flavour because we've got
Hmm.
good flavours down here.
Hmm. Yeah,
We do.
indeed we do.
We do.
Yeah,
We've got some great composers, haven't we?
we really do. And I was actually
Mm.
thinking about that while we were talking that when I started off doing the choral series in 1991, things were quite different in the publishing world, and it was relatively unusual to self-publish, which is what I did. But now it's much more common, and many composers have websites and are writing good stuff for young choirs. So there's a lot more music out there now, and it's a lot easier to find. I guess things can get very lost online as well. Um, but I think it is easier to get music now than what it used to be, which is great for those of us who are always looking for new music and wanting to find stuff. Having digital copies can be really helpful, so you don't have to pay a lot of postage to have paper sent around the world.
I agree, yes. But when it was that much harder, we appreciated YVM even more. So thank you for doing that, Mark.
Oh, pleasure.
All right. I'd like to talk about singing in a choir, making positive changes in the lives of children.
Mm.
My listeners are anybody who sings with their children in class or in a choir. They've seen the faces light up, the forget the fight they had on the way into the music room. You know, there is magic in that. I think we all know that. But what sort of things can you tell us about that sort of feeling that's given to your choristers, and maybe some stories from your experience about the positive changes?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting question, and it can be a little hard to pin down. I mean, I can give you very specific examples of, for example, uh, the choirs can have some pretty quirky kids in it. Neurodiversity is our speciality in the choir world in many ways. And I remember we took away one of our singers who was a boy with probably about 14, and this was quite a long tour to the United States. We did, I think it was maybe 3 weeks. And his mum said, when we got back, he said, thanks for bringing him home. And I have to say, he's a changed person and a much nicer person than he was when he left. And I thought, oh, well, that was interesting. But I can see why, because you're really learning to deal with community. You're working on a common task with other people. You're living with them, traveling with them, having the excitement of seeing great things with them. So I just think it makes you more important aware of the importance of being part of a community, and willingly being an active member of that community and being connected to the people around you. So, we see that a lot. I mean, part of that's normal teenage stuff. You learn independence and I guess, bond with your friends and you share experiences, which can end up uh, creating lifelong friendships, which is, I guess, one of the reasons you can see the strength of that. We've noticed too lately that I've had a few children post-pandemic who've been badly affected psychologically, and having trouble reconnecting at school and with their peers, but through being part of the choir community have done a lot of healing as far as that goes, and sort of found their place in the world and the community, which then helps them find their place back in their school communities as well. And that's very touching when you see that sort of scenario.
That's
Yeah.
special. You're offering them something unique.
Well, I think with Young Voice of Melbourne, we've done a lot of touring over the years. It's been a stalwart of our program, really. We've toured every year since 1992. I think was the first one, except for the 2000, where we were disrupted by the pandemic in 2001. But every other year we tour somewhere, either within Australia or overseas. But we have found that for our singers to be very, very important part of the program. Um, I mean, they have to learn a lot of music. So there's a significant musical challenge in there, which once they've achieved that, and enjoy. They get kudos from standing on stage and people clapping them, which they obviously like.
Mm-hmm.
But they also then get the fun of traveling with their friends and seeing new places and doing new things. And I think that's all creates to a strength in your community, which gets you then through the rest of the year, and perhaps doing some of the more mundane things that you might need to do and that are not so exciting, but that gives you that strength in your community.
Yes, the
It keeps
strength
them
of
there.
community and the success, like you said. Like we all
Hmm.
need to feel we succeed at something, don't we? And
Exactly, and choirs, the choirs are not always what people necessarily think. You don't have to have a most fabulous voice to be the most fabulous choir member.
Mhm.
We need a range of skills in choir. We need those who, yes, we need some fabulous voices for our soloists, and we need good voices and competent voices. But not everyone's going to be a soloist, and you need those who can concentrate really, really well in rehearsals. You need those who can memorize things really accurately, those who can read really well, those who are the people who keep the community together, the social leaders. That everyone's just as important, and and it's good for people to find a place, even if they're not going to be your soloists, and that's I
I
think.
love that. I love that. And as someone who could never be a soloist, I love singing in a choir. And I think I'm a good chorister and I think I contribute, but I could just don't have what it takes to be the big star, but I'm still important when I'm in a choir. So
Yeah, which can also lead to challenges too for those of us who like literacy-based programs, because some kids find that stuff very hard. Um, not everyone, just the way that some people find reading words difficult. Um, so even though we put a high value on those who succeed well in sight reading and all of that, and we monitor their progress and all that sort of stuff, if someone's not so good at that, it's really important for them to understand that they're valued for other reasons, because they learn their music really well, or they've got a beautiful voice, or they can always hold their part, while at the same time, encouraging them to improve their reading skills if they can. So, yeah, choirs have a lot of opportunity, I guess, for different types of people.
good point. I love that. What advice would you give to choral conductors and people wanting to work with choirs? Maybe a good way to start, or some thoughts on mindset that might be handy for you to succeed as a choral director.
Well, I think the first thing is to find out what choirs actually are. I think from when we start, and I know certainly when I started, I had a particular idea about what choirs do and how they work and all of that. But you can be wrong, and if you can find opportunities to watch other people work with their choirs and go to other people's rehearsals and other people's concerts. I mean, I was lucky to do that in an international forum when I went on a Churchill Fellowship, but it doesn't have to be at that level. If you go along to the local Stedford and just hear what people are sharing as their best songs, that's a really learning experience. If you ask people if you can come and sit in on their rehearsals and see what they do. I would do that. I think we learn from each other a great deal. So particularly if you're a young conductor, find some people that you admire whose work you look up to, and don't be shy about saying, can I come and work with you or just watch a rehearsal or two? And I think the more of that you see, then the better equipped you are when you come to run your rehearsals, to see, okay, well, I've seen what happens and what might go well here and what might not go well here. And I guess know what you want to emulate. And of course, performance-wise, now with YouTube, you can do a lot of that without leaving your seat. There's so many great performances on YouTube of all sorts of different choirs. That there's no excuse really for not knowing what choirs can do. It's
Mm.
very easy. I think it's easy for us to underestimate, particularly what children's choirs can do. When you think, if you ask someone what choir, a non-choir person, you say, what choirs have you heard of? What do you know about choirs? They might say, oh, the Vienna Boys Choir. Well, there you go. It's a primary school choir, isn't it? not to be underestimated. They might know King's College, Cambridge, full of primary school boys and semi-professional singers as well. But primary kids can do amazing things, and I think that's good to remember as well, not to
Yes.
underestimate them.
Yes. Great advice. Watch others. Watch others work. Learn from each other. That's wonderful advice, and something that we can all use all the time to keep growing. Now, we're going to get to my nuggets of fabulous now. Those people in the last episode that if you were waiting for the nuggets, well, I'm sorry, you had to wait till this episode. So my listeners love hearing nuggets. Now, of course, you've dripped nuggets already, tips and ideas and stuff, but fabulous repertoire, favorite songs, ideas, anything at all. What sort of nuggets of fabulous would you like to drop on us, Mark?
Well, I would say there's a few things perhaps. One is don't skimp on your warm-ups in your rehearsals. And
Oh.
I know a lot of people can get guilty. You've got half an hour a week, you've got a concert in 3 weeks' time, got a lot of songs you haven't finished learning, think, oh, no, quick skip over the
Yep.
warm-ups. I always think that is going to catch up with you. And because after all, warm-ups are that time when you teach your choir to sound good. And if you're not doing that, doesn't matter how often you spend on your repertoire, it's not going to sound that good. So I would say, take that warming up thing seriously. And for me, warming up is not so much about warming up voices. After all, little kids' voices are often very well warmed up by the time they get to you. They've
Yep.
been using them very actively for all day. But they need to learn how to listen to each other and sing in tune with each other and how to make the nicest possible sounds that they can with their voices. And that does require focus. And I just find that time at the start of the rehearsal, just, I find even now with my choirs that they get there and they're thinking about a million other things until, they sing something fairly simple and warm up and go, yeah, that's fine, but can I please now have the in-tune version? And could we really listen to each other to focus that sound? So I would say don't skimp on the warm-ups is
Oh,
the first thing I would say.
I love it. And I think that's such that even the heavens are agreeing with that nugget of fabulous, because the sun has moved in your window and it's
Oh,
now
it has.
ta-da across the screen. So if you're watching this on YouTube, that's
Sure.
such a nugget of fabulous that we now have a beautifully sunlit Mark. So
Yeah,
the heavens agree. No,
there you go.
it's true. And look, I'm the first one to say I've certainly done that in my time where I go, "Oh, we haven't quite got the alto part down. The concert's in two. Let's go. You're right. Don't
Yeah.
skimp on the warm up. It will come back to bite you on the bum."
It will. And after all, I mean, I guess the other little nugget is there. If you plan really well, then you'll be able to fit it all in. But that I still plan every rehearsal I do in writing and keep them all in a file. And because I know that I could run a rehearsal without planning it, no problem. But it's not what I do today that counts. It's how it fits in with what has to happen next week and the week after, and when's the concert, and how much time have I got to allocate to this and that, and still do the things that are important, the sight reading and the vocal work and all of that sort of stuff. And you just won't be able to do it without that planning. So planning, not to mention the fact that it gives you all these resources to draw on because you've got last year's rehearsal plans there and the year before's as well. And you can see, yeah, what did I do there that worked really well? What did I do there that I should avoid because it didn't go so well or something?
Yes. Yes. Again, another nugget of fabulous. That's wonderful. All right. Did you want any other nuggets before we go on to advocacy? Or no more nuggets?
Advocacy is so hard. No, I don't think there are any other
I mean,
nuggets.
I'm sure I shouldn't say that. You've got lots, any that you'd like to share right now, I guess I should say.
No, I guess what I said before though too about doing lots of easy music rather than focusing on just a few more difficult pieces, I think is always good advice. I think for a choir of any level,
Yes.
people, I have a fairly short attention span, so I always assume everyone else does too. So I like to get through a lot of music in the rehearsals that I do. That also means that get to the end and people go, oh, wow, where did that time go? Seems like we just started rather than have time to get bogged down in things.
And from another point of view, if you think of it from the audience point of view, who would not want to hear something simple or simpler sung beautifully than
Yeah.
sit through some complex thing not done really well, which you also talked about before? So from
Yeah.
an audience point of view, you want to do something well, even if it's that little step below what they could do. I'd rather do something simple beautifully. And like you said, you get more done, greater variety, more learning, and better for the audience.
You're right. And I think being respectful of your audience is so important, But I hate going to concerts where choirs just stand in a row or 2 rows or 3 rows for the whole performance. I think, come on, I want to see something different. And so, my choirs do complain at times that they're standing in a different position for every song. But the sound changes if you're standing in different positions. Choir members have a little bit of energy as they move from new position to new position. You can use the acoustic space that you're in more effectively if you're thinking about that as well. So, yeah, I think being respectful for your audience, particularly in schools, actually, you don't want, you've got a captive audience. Your parents will come anyway, but you shouldn't take advantage of that and sort of torture them with it.
Oh,
If you can make it, I guess, without compromising, I don't mean just, sing pop songs and things that
yeah.
everyone knows, but present what you want to do in a way that makes it accessible and interesting for an
Yes.
audience.
Uh,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, because I can't stand going to a concert where I have no connection to any of the music. I like to
Mm.
have some connection. It doesn't have to be all songs from my era, but
No,
a beautiful rendition of Danny Boy that was my father's favorite song in there somewhere, or like, because you want to connect emotionally with your audience. And if all you do is brand new, very clever music that is over the heads of a lot of our audience, you know what I mean by
I
over our
do.
heads.
I do.
That's not going to bring joy to the audience.
No. I
You,
mean, having said that, you can actually do what's very challenging music for an audience if you give them a handle onto it. It might be, this music might sound weird to you, and this is why, and this is what the composer's trying to do. And actually, there's a really interesting story that goes into this. Um, and I think if you share that with people, go, yeah, I hear this is weird, but I understand it,
yes.
and I get it, and I appreciate it. Um, and you might be stretching if that piece then goes on for 45 minutes, but that's
Yeah,
another story.
but you've got a good point. And in fact, that could be a whole podcast, blog post, book, the conductor as educator, not with your
Absolutely.
choir, with the audience, because you're also educating your audience, aren't you?
Absolutely, all the time. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's not, not an easy thing to do always. You can get a bit of blowback sometimes from audiences, parents, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't get what you're doing, you haven't communicated it well enough, or they've got very strong ideas about what they think they should be hearing. So, but yeah, it's definitely a massive role. You're educating your singers all the time if you work with young
Yeah.
choirs, particularly. And when I say young, I mean everyone under 30. Um,
Oh, for us, everyone under 60.
yeah, well, that too. That too. Yeah, that's an important part of it.
Oh, it
Mm.
is, absolutely. Which actually leads nicely into advocacy. Now,
Mm.
you probably know I've been fairly involved in some music advocacy type work. in Queensland and specifically a bit in Australia. We really do. Music educators are seeming to have to fight even harder for our profession. Do you have any advice around advocacy? And I think we have alluded to some of this too, anyway, in our talk about what we say to audiences as choral conductors, but any additional advice around advocacy, how telling people how important music is? Like, you don't have to convince me, right?
No.
I'm in your audience and you don't have to convince me how important it is. But how do you convince
I
people?
think it's easy to be a bit depressed about all of that, actually. So, a positive thing first, I would say that the best advocacy any of us can do is by doing the best work we can in our community, because then that will be one community that understands and values music education. So they will tell their friends and they will tell their families and their cousins and their siblings that, oh, music education's done a wonderful thing for my child. At this school, this is what they do. I mean, I think that's something that all of us can do. Just, do our best work and share it in our community best we can.
Yeah.
And that is a very, very powerful advocacy that we can all be involved in. I think it's a little bit hard with music education because in a way we're our worst enemies in that we have a lot of difficulty agreeing with what we should teach in music. We all have our clans, our Orff clan and our Kodai clan and our Delcro's clan and our not having any of that clan and the Futures clans. And I was talking to one of my choir mums the other day, and she worked as a education bureaucrat in Victoria, and she worked as a music education bureaucrat. And she said one of her jobs was to listen to the input from the sector. So she said, but there wasn't any. She said the maths person who sat opposite her, having a meeting every week with someone from the Maths Teachers Federation or this industry group or other about what they thought maths should be doing. The science people, they've had lots of meetings, lots of people. He said, no one, in music, there's nothing. And because music, the way we structure ourselves is we're all in little organizations run by volunteers, and no one's out there with the time and the energy to be having those sort of meetings. So it's not a big surprise when things, perhaps say in schools anyway, don't get the attention that they need. I don't know how you fix that, except by all uniting under one banner. I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon.
I know. I felt that, and when I've done curriculum writing projects and I've been involved in that, and that's just people live in their little silos and are quite passionate about their particular philosophy, and like that's great, but it's also not great. It's like, so we were on a committee and there were other arts people. So like drama has Drama Queensland, end of story. We have the Queensland All Society. We, at that time, I think they're not so visible now, but there was the Delcro's people and there's the Kodai people. And then I do think, and I don't know if I'm going to be saying, maybe I shouldn't say this publicly, but hell, who cares? I'm just going to say it. I actually think that this is the role for ASME to do. That's just my opinion, is that that's the way ASME should move, because they're the Australian Society of Music Educators.
I agree, but that can only happen if we all join ASME.
Yes.
And we will give ASME the support that it needs so that ASME has,
has the power and voice of all of us. So
exactly.
I think things have to morph a bit for that to happen. But to me, that seems to be the logical way to go.
Yeah. I remember when the Kodai Association was formed, actually, two of the founders had a bit of a disagreement. No, I won't say who they were.
No,
but
don't.
one was arguing that we shouldn't have a Kodai Association and that we should all be, all of us who are interested in music education should join ASME, and we should have a Kodai interest group within ASME, an ORF interest group within ASME, a Suzuki interest group within ASME, not have all these little organizations. But the founding fathers of Code, I think, said, no, we want to have our own organization, which is what everyone else decided too. I often think, what if it had gone the other way? Would it be different? Maybe it would be better if we had one unified voice. How many people do we have in Australia who work professionally as advocates for music education? I can't think of anyone.
I think perhaps some of the people in the Tony Foundation.
Okay. Yep.
I think
Yep.
they work, that's their work is music
Mm.
advocacy.
Yeah. Well, and we need way more of that.
We need way more. And the
I'm
rest of
still
it's
in.
like people like me, working full time, running a
That's it.
business, doing 1,000 things, and then on the side, I'm fighting for music.
I'm still involved in the Kodai committee in Victoria. I've been actually, I can't tell you how long, but it's probably 40 years or something I've been on
Yeah,
that
join
committee.
the club. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know how long, but one thing that I'm super keen on doing is, like, we have now paid administrator, which is absolutely fabulous and
Yes.
has improved our efficiency and what we can do and all of that. I think we need also now to try and fund a paid um, education officer, or someone who has time and is paid a proper wage to do some of the non-administrative work, the advocacy work, the planning work that we really need. And I reckon we should be able to find a way to fund that, at least, see if it works or not.
That
But
is an interesting thought. And in fact, could we go one further? This is me just jumping, because I love, idea. There's another. Wouldn't it be good if all the associations put in to fund an advocacy education officer?
I think it would be great. And I think, I mean, really, I mean, I think we have an issue. This is sort of getting a little bit off topic here, isn't it?
Oh,
But
just a bit.
it's Australia is not a very big place, and yet we have state branches all over the place of
Mm.
all of our organisations, as well as a national organisation. It's not that really clear that that structure is working that well anymore to me. I think one organisation could easily run all the workshops and courses that we need for Kodai in Australia.
Mm.
I don't. Um, I think the tyrannies of distance are not what they used to be, and we could. I think there would be certain economies in that. Um, my sister um, was involved in the Celiac Association, and she found the same thing, and she actually did the work to create one large national organisation, rather than a whole lot of smaller branches, to try and give them more professionalism and also more money so they could do more stuff.
Mm.
And I think uh, it, I hesitate to say it's what we should do right now, because there's so many great people involved in the state branches and national level, um, that would probably not agree with my plan.
I
Um,
know, but it's the interesting thoughts because things have changed. And when we formed our association, like I live for our Kodai workshops and things, and it wasn't fees. We did not have Zoom. You and I are chatting on Zoom.
mm,
We've got a member on our Queensland Kodai committee, our treasurer, lovely Susie. Hi, Susie. She's in Mackay. She's like
mm,
a day's drive away, and she's
mm,
on our committee. Now we could
mm.
never have done that when I was first on the committee. And I
Yeah.
could, the fact to go to a workshop regularly in Sydney, I couldn't have afforded to do.
Mm.
So,
However, it wouldn't have been that hard to have whoever was taking that fabulous workshop in Sydney fly up to Brisbane and do it there.
yes,
But that would require some sort of national coordination, and then fly them to Melbourne and fly them to Adelaide and to Perth. And, um, I think there could be more of that, I think, in the future of the way that we do things.
I think that's very good food for thought.
Indeed.
Okay. No, I'm
We'll
loving that.
see what happens.
Yeah, I'm loving that. You shouldn't give me things to put on my back burner. It's already full, Mark. Okay, we're going to finish off. Thank you. This has been the most amazing chat, and I've loved talking to you again. But you get to get on your soapbox before we finish. I like to say, get on your soapbox and tell the world anything that you'd really like to tell them. Off you go.
I just think that all music educators are wonderful, and I just say, be happy with what you do, be proud of what you do. Don't let the bastards get you down. Um, because it's not an easy job at times. Often we work in isolation. Some of us are lucky and have great teams, but many of us don't. The only music educator within our school or our organization, whatever, I would say, look after ourselves and be proud of what we do, and find the support that we need from each other. And I think if we do that, then there'll be a longevity in the practice, which I think is really important. I get a bit worried when I see particularly young teachers working in schools who are getting burnt out. I'm not a big fan of that term, but I see the pressures that they're under in schools, and it's not good because we lose, I think, too many really good people, um, because it is becoming a little bit hard for them. So let's look after each other and ourselves, and I think that will help all of us.
I love that. On that note, Mark, I would like to thank you very much for chatting with us.
It's been a pleasure, Deb. It's just great to see you again. I think the last time we did see each other was at probably a Kodai National Conference, and the next one coming up, we'll be able to have some more chats then.
Well, we might have just a little vino together or something.
That's our Victorian specialty.
Oh, okay. Excellent. I will see you then. Bye, Mark.
Bye, Deb.
As we know, laughter relieves stress. Don't lose sight of the funny side of life. When you dream in colour, is it a pigment of your imagination? Thank you so much for watching our Crescendo Music Education podcast. For more information about all things Crescendo, including membership and music education resources, visit us at crescendo.com.au. Don't forget to like and subscribe